I'm not Captain Walker. I'm the guy who carries Mr. Dead in his pocket. 2 men enter, 1 man leaves. Hello YouTubers, you're on a new action reaction, and today I'm going to be giving my retrospective review and thoughts of Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. Yes, the 3rd installment of the Mad Max series, or at the time the Mad Max trilogy. It was a final entry. It came out in 1985, only a couple of years after The Road Warrior or Mad Max 2. And this was the first one to receive American financing. Warner Brothers did it, and that's why you have stars like Tina Turner. So yeah, Mel Gibson reprises his role as Max Rokitansky, and then you have Bruce Spence in another role as Jedediah the pilot. And then Tina Turner is Aunt Entity, which is kind of like the film's main antagonist in a way. But really, it's Bartertown. But yeah, as 2 directors, George Miller and George Ogilvy. George Miller decided just to do the action scenes instead of the story, and they were location scouting for this film, and the producer, Byron Kennedy, who George Miller worked with in the previous 2, suffered an accident and died. He died while location scouting, and George Miller just fell out of it and just wanted to handle the action scenes and allowed George Ogilvy to do the story scenes. So you have 2 different directors, and at times it does kind of show. But originally, this wasn't supposed to be a Mad Max movie at all. It was going to be like a post-apocalyptic Lord of the Flies type of film, which you can see is more apparent in the second half. But somebody had the bright idea of like, you know what, why don't we just make this a Mad Max film? And it kind of blends the best of both worlds, really. It makes it a very different installment to the Mad Max series. It's also the first one that's rated PG-13, which is a little bit of a downer, but it really has the same amount of violence, in my opinion. It's one of the better PG-13 sequels, in my opinion. It'd be RoboCop 3, Expendables 3, Live Free or Die Hard, and Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome is right at the top for a PG-13 sequel, actually being just as good as the previous R-rated installments. But yeah, the story starts off with Max Rokitansky. He's basically continued onward in this wasteland after the Road Warrior. He's in a desert. It's in a desert environment. His hair is long, and he has his vehicle that is robbed. He basically gets mugged by Jedediah the pilot, played by Bruce Spence. Him and his son basically like kick him off of his vehicle, take his vehicle and all of his belongings. He only has a select items. So he's drifting in the desert at the beginning of this film, and he runs across this town called Bartertown, in which they trade, and it also has highly radioactive water. Anyways, he basically surrenders his weapons and goes there to make a deal, and this is where he meets Tina Turner as Aunt Entity, Auntie Entity, and they just call her Auntie in the film. They don't call her Auntie Entity, but they just call her Auntie. And he makes a deal. He clearly shows them that he has skills to fight, and they're like, we may need your help, and in addition, you can have your belongings back. So they need his help to eliminate the leader of Bartertown, called Master Blaster, which is basically Master, a little person. He's an older little person, a midget, on top of this huge giant guy in a helmet called Blaster. He's like this Bane-like figure, and together they make Master Blaster. And it's really great in this movie because he has to work undercover, and the whole town, Bartertown, is fueled by pig shit. Like, they basically get the energy of pig crap and power the whole city, which is something very unique and really ahead of its time, in my opinion. And that's one thing I like about Mad Max. They find new ways to introduce this apocalyptic world of, like, not just there's this apocalyptic world, but how would it function if people are still having civilization and the world's halfway destroyed? How would people live on? And this is a really unique way to show that. Anyway, he basically picks a fight with him, and they must fight in this gladiator arena called Thunderdome. This crazy fight, some of the best action, and then this is where the film really shines, and you kind of think the film's going to focus on it. Thunderdome's only in it a little bit, but then again, it's beyond Thunderdome. But it's such a great fight, one of the most breathtaking fight scenes, and among one of my favorite moments of the entire saga, and is this trilogy with Mel Gibson. But yeah, it's pretty crazy stuff, and Max does not go through with the deal. He can't kill this guy. He's just like a kid. Blaster has like this imagination as a kid, and Master's watching, and he can't go through with it, so they have this like little wheel. It's like you break a deal, you must face the wheel. So there's all these different type of punishments, and he ends up getting gulag. So they pretty much put him out gulag, and he's out in the desert, left for dead. And this is where the second half of the film kind of transitions. You have these young children who have been left in after a plane crash, kind of like Lost Boys and Peter Pan. They find Max, they cut his hair so he has a short hair. And they think he's this guy named Captain Walker. And he's not. They think that Captain Walker's come back for them. They pretty much just left him. Their plane crashed, and they don't know what happened to the outside world, so they're just all feral kids and stuff. Only 2 older people, and then like 1 teenager who's like a young adult. And pretty much the kids get in trouble, and then one of them goes into Bartertown, and Max and the group have to get the kid out of Bartertown, and with his return, it causes alarm for Anti-Entity, and Anti-Entity's men in Bartertown start going after Max. And this is where it gets really action-packed and feels like a Mad Max movie again, is where you have this huge car chase, and pretty much ends where Max sacrifices himself to save this group. He stays behind so they can leave. And she lets him go. She respects that in him, that this man, this raggedy man, has made it a long way, and it's bittersweet. It ends with and it's like the Outback. It's like Australia. They go from the Outback to like Australia, and you see the ruins of like the Sydney Opera House and stuff. And they live on. They multiply. They continue to have life in their society, and it's almost like a story told by them. They got a chance to have life outside of their area in the wasteland, and we just see Max just walking off in the desert on the sunset. But it's beautiful for this trilogy. Not only for this installment, but this was the last one at the time, for this trilogy to close, Mel Gibson's trilogy. Max has gone through a lot of pain, suffering. He's helped others, but this one, he comes full circle and regains his humanity. And that's just bittersweet, seeing this character come full circle and get a bit of his old self back. And that's just, it's such a perfect conclusion. It does get slow in parts with the kids. I do like some of the Captain Walker stuff, and then there was originally going to be a deleted scene where it had him flashback to his family get killed. That's actually in the music video for We Don't Need Another Hero. Speaking of that, Tina Turner has 2 songs, awesome songs. We Don't Need Another Hero came from this, and One of the Living. Such a great opening for the film for One of the Living, like, and then it's like, it's going to have an epic sound to it. So if you watch it in a row, One of the Living really elevates this. And I love We Don't Need Another Hero, because after this trilogy and just Mad Max, Mel Gibson's Mad Max, we don't need another hero. But yeah, the soundtrack's great, and you can definitely tell where the slow parts are. So as far as that, it's a great film. Very few can live up. Is it as good as the first 2? It's a little bit weaker than the first 2 installments, but it is not a bad installment by any means. And it's kind of cool that they can keep it original and refreshing even after 2 installments. For a 3rd installment that's PG-13, they actually do a pretty good job, and it's a very different tale. And that's one thing I respect. It's very different than the other 2. And serves as a good conclusion for Max. There's a lot more Max in this. But yeah, George Ogilvy and George Miller did a good job on this. And the story moments are good, but it kind of slows down. It feels like 2 separate films at times. You have the Bartertown Thunderdome stuff, the chase scene at the end. Those feel very Mad Max. And then you have like this other like Lord and the Flies, Lost Boys, Peter Pan type of stuff going on. And it's not entirely bad, but it just feels very different from the other parts. But it all ties back together in some way, and because of that, some may say this should deserve a 3, but I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5 and an A-. It's not up there with Road Warrior or Mad Max, but it is a good successor, and it's a fitting conclusion to the trilogy at the time, to the Mel Gibson trilogy. And it wouldn't be till like after another 25 so years till Fury Road came out. So yeah, this is before Lethal Weapon. Mel Gibson did these all 3 before Lethal Weapon. That's a long time, 1985. And like I said in my previous videos, I've been a fan of Mad Max since 1999 when I was 8 years old. I had the trilogy on VHS. I love Thunderdome. And I actually thought Thunderdome was the second one because I saw the Road Warrior at the video store. And I'm like, that looks like Max, but it says Road Warrior, so I was kind of confused. And I was like, how did you get from like 1 to Thunderdome? And then my brother's like, there's another one. This is the third one. And I'm like, what? So yeah, this was the second Mad Max movie I saw. And yeah. So, if you need any kids to get into Mad Max, this one's a good story. It's PG-13, but yeah, I just love this trilogy, and it's one of my favorites as a film viewer and just also a filmmaker. The Mad Max trilogy, and this film especially, really influenced me to become a filmmaker. So yeah, a 4 out of 5 and an A-. If you haven't seen Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome or any of the Mad Max films, I highly recommend checking them all out, especially if you like dystopian type of films or action films. It's all real here, no CGI. And if you like Fury Road, you should definitely check out the originals. Fury Road took it to another level, but the originals have a special place in my heart, and there's a certain type of magic that they have. And yeah, I like Tina Turner in this. She's really cool as Auntie Entity and Master Blaster and all the characters, and it's cool seeing Jedediah, the pilot, Bruce Spence, back in another role. In a way, you could say he's a Jarrow captain, but he's another role, but it's kind of cool. The stuff between him and Mel Gibson in the film is kind of great if you've seen Road Warrior. But yeah, ultimately, this film is just a blast, and I would highly recommend it. And if you've seen Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome, let me know what your reaction to the film is. What's your favorite moment, and what's your favorite Mad Max out of either the trilogy or like the quadrilogy now? And yeah, if you like this video, feel free to like, comment, subscribe, and check out my other stuff. Check out my previous Mad Max reviews. I reviewed Mad Max and The Road Warrior previously. You can check that out in the links below in the video description. So yeah, that is it for Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome. A fitting end to the Mel Gibson trilogy, and even though it doesn't have as much action as the other two, it is still a pretty good film, story-wise and everything. And even though the action is a bit down, the moments that do have action are really great. So, on that note, we don't need another hero.